Is all art political? That's a question I've seen in a bunch of places online recently, but it's been sparking a pretty big debate between people basically since art began. Some say that all art and media in general is inherently political, and others insist that art doesn't have to be political at all. I have to admit, I felt some bias about this issue right off the bat, primarily since I noticed that many arguing that art doesn't need to be political seem to be the same people who complain about how video games or movies have been politicized as soon as they see a minority who isn't a background character. Not my favorite kind of person, for obvious reasons. However, I think the truth of the matter lies somewhere in between. I don't think all art or media is created with political intentions, but I do believe that basically any piece of art can be political, regardless of the intentions of its origins. We live in a highly politicized world, one where almost every perspective and identity has some political implications. Simply due to the circumstances we find ourselves in, almost any attempt to portray an opinion or view through art will be inherently political to some degree. Even if it is created with no political intentions, the people who partake in it will interpret it in their own ways, influenced by their circumstances and frames of reference, including the political ones. Frankly, I think it's silly to think that any piece of art or other media could exist without ever being examined through a political lens. When I was a kid, I was a voracious reader. However, I also liked playing video games quite a lot, much to the chagrin of my parents. As I'm sure is an experience many in my generation had, they limited the amount of screen time I was granted each week quite heavily. In an effort to justify video games as an activity that was just as educational and valuable as books were, I often argued to them that there was always something to learn from any book, video game, or movie, and that I would just need to be conscious of that, rather than simply partaking in them with no intention to learn. Of course, I was just a kid trying to justify my interests in a way they would approve of, but that idea has gone on to inform the way I interact with a lot of media now. If you approach them with the intention to learn something, or glean something from them, you'll find something of value. I think that kind of analysis is incredibly valuable. Art exists for many reasons, but one that stands above the others, for me at least, is the glimpse they can provide into the perspectives of others, and what I can learn about myself from it. So, to summarize, I think that any media or art can be political. Most of it is inherently political to some extent, but even the portion that isn't is quickly made so through viewer interpretation. But, of course, being political isn't a bad thing. Anything that can help you challenge your worldview and do some introspection can be incredibly valuable. You just need to approach the art that you partake in with a level of critical analysis. Not critical as in being actually critical and pointing out bad parts of the media that you're in. There is value in that, of course, but the criticism that I'm talking about is specifically in analyzing the intentions of the work and in viewing what kind of message that it can portray through how it's being presented to you. On a slightly different note, but of course still related, I think it's also worth mentioning that what we consider political as a society can change pretty quickly, especially when it's being used as a buzzword. Until recently, I don't know if there were many people who would have said that the existence of PBS or the television series that it makes was particularly political, but that's shifted massively in light of recent events. With all that being said, thank you so much for joining me for today's video. I am looking forward to making a couple of other different kinds of videos in the future. I'm looking into other kinds of formats and such, maybe be changing some things up soon. But I hope I'll see you all back in 2 weeks with my next one. For the time being though, feel free to drop a comment down below with any thoughts you might have about today's topic. Hit that subscribe button and maybe the notification bell if you want to be notified when I come back in 2 weeks. Other than all that, I will see you then. Bye!